Welcome to this week's program. I'm Shannon Loehrke. We are in the midst of uncertain times. There are the ongoing impacts of COVID-19 and emerging variants. There's the congestion in the supply chain, which is wreaking havoc for individuals and businesses, and there's a labor shortage. But there are also some positive signs. Joining me to talk about how the state is managing these and other challenges is the Governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz. Thank you for joining me.
Glad to be with you, Shannon.
Tax receipts so far this fiscal year are $8 billion more than was projected, 10% above projections by Minnesota Management and Budget, with the caveat that future forecasts are just around the corner. What does this tell you about Minnesota's economy?
Well, first, I think good decisions have been made. I think Minnesota has a long tradition of good fiscal management. I think we have mechanisms that put in place rainy day funds that we needed to use that came through. But it speaks to the entrepreneurship and individual businesses that they're continuing to grow. But I do think it's important to note that economic good news isn't necessarily equal across all groups. We know that COVID had a disproportionate impact on socioeconomically challenged families. Communities of color were hit harder too, but I do think it puts us in a good position, both with the recovery dollars, what the state finances are showing, for us to be able to look at what does a world after the worst of COVID look like, and how do we create a continuing resilient economy. I think one of the blessings Minnesota's always had, we have a diverse economy. We have a strong ag economy. We have medical devices. We have entrepreneurship. We have a lot of Fortune 500 companies, but we have a lot of startups. That lets us make sure that we weather some of the harder times. But I do think it puts us in a good position to invest in the things that matter, especially our people, in a fiscally responsible manner, and then to make up for some of those inequities that were caused by COVID, focusing on housing, workforce development, some of the things that we're hearing in all corners of the state.
So, speaking of future economic growth, you and a delegation of Minnesotans who represented medical technology, food and agriculture, environmental technology, and education just recently returned from a trade visit to England and Finland. Why those two countries, and what do you hope will be the fruit of this?
Yeah, those two countries are important trading partners for us. They're not the biggest, obviously Canada, Mexico, we have some others, but the potential is really great. And one of the purposes of this is that the Finns said this the same as us, that they don't do a good job of talking about what they do well. Finland ranks first in education. They rank first in quality of life, many of those things. Same way Minnesota does when you compare us against states. We have the largest or the longest 5-year survival rate of businesses. We have a high workforce participation rate. The purpose was to get out there and see how these folks are thinking and to build on our existing relationships. We visited the new Mayo Clinic, London, and then we visited Uponor, which has thousands of employees here in Minnesota. And I think going out and making the case of what Minnesota has to offer to sell it, and then to hear what I was really excited about is the optimism they feel towards Minnesota and the commonalities. Both of those nations focused on Minnesota leaning into carbon reduction, a clean energy economy, innovation around that. Those things entice them. So we, for example, spoke with battery manufacturers who know that we're moving towards more of electrification in our transportation system. But then speaking to higher ed of saying, Minnesota's innovation, whether it came agriculture-wise, medical device, 3M, companies that they know started in our universities, they're interested in partnership. And we saw last week, St. Cloud State has already solidified some of those relationships. So it's a positive.
And does the Brexit thing with the United Kingdom, does that pose actually even greater opportunity for Minnesota?
Absolutely. And they wouldn't. It was really interesting. There were those who were opposed to Brexit and those who were for it, but both understood that now they needed to go out and work. And I think there's a pending trade deal between the United States, a bilateral between the United States and Britain. But what they're realizing is those are hard. They take a long time. And just to be candid, our federal politics is pretty difficult to move things. So they're looking at state by state. We obviously can't do everything, but there are things that we can do in that. So we received a really positive reception there. I think, again, I stood, and the companies that were there stood on the shoulders of giants, or were giants. When you take Hormel and Mayo Clinic and the University of Minnesota into a space, people know of that globally. But to see the startups that surrounded them. So I agree with you, and that's one of the reasons we targeted the UK, because they came to us. Both of these countries came to us very interested in what we're doing, very interested in working together.
This coming legislative session is an even year, which is a bonding year. And conversations are already happening about a Minnesota bonding bill. President Joe Biden just signed a $1 trillion infrastructure package, of which I think $6.8 billion will come to the state of Minnesota. So what needs to happen for our state to leverage those dollars to the best of our ability? And is this a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to really upgrade Minnesota's infrastructure?
I think it may be. I would hope there'll be more to come. We have Build Back Betters on the horizon potentially, but I think in my experience on this, I spent about a dozen years on the Transportation Committee in the U.S. Congress, worked with late Jim Oberstar, and this was a dream for so many of us, and I would argue a bipartisan dream of infrastructure. One of the things is no matter where you're at on the political spectrum, investments in roads, bridges, and transportation, water infrastructure is a pretty popular thing. This is huge, and what it allows Minnesota to do is to leverage those federal dollars. We'll need to be partners with them. A lot of times there's matching dollars that go with us, but we've been kind of limping along in Minnesota. We have over 5,000 roads that are listed as poor, 661 bridges that are poor. As you heard the president say, we have thousands of miles of lead pipe that still needs to be replaced, and we don't have connected broadband to everything. Now we have that capacity. So instead of pulling from and robbing from the general fund, we now have the leverage to be able to put in, and we know that those investments in infrastructure turn around about 5 to 1 in terms of what they do for communities, and not to mention safety, upgrading all of the things we can do. So I said if I would have been in Congress, I would have viewed this vote as a top 5 vote of my decade in Congress about how important it was. As governor, it's almost stunning of what we're going to be able to do, what we'll be able to invest in. And again, I would say anytime you're doing this type of investment, these are public-private partnerships. The private sector will be investing. That's why we were out at Dakota County to look at the technical college about how we're going to build the workforce, because that is an issue for everyone. A lot of older folks said, I'm not going back. They're unsure about COVID. But now we're starting to see these opportunities. So I'm excited about it. State needs to be ready. The state did a good job last year. Bipartisan in our bonding package was local jobs was incredible. I'm going to suggest I think we get close to that number again. We're about at $2 billion. Coupled with what we're seeing from the federal government, this catches us up to a point. We were about $20 billion behind what we needed to be. We have the potential between the last bonding bill, this one, and the federal money coming in to take over half of that. So you're talking about a decade worth of projects. And again, I think this is very personal to people. This is unwinding that mess in Duluth at the Twin Ports. It's roads that people know they lost people on. When I cut the ribbon on the new 4-lane down in Duluth or down in Mankato, it was a neighbor who was killed on that road that you're thinking about and talking about. So I think Minnesotans, when they start to see it, when they heard it was a $1 trillion deal, it's DC, they're fighting, whatever. No, that's a water treatment plant in Waldorf. That's what that means. And so I'm excited about it. It's good for jobs, and we know that that type of investment pays itself back off.
Now, you mentioned COVID just a moment ago, because I imagine governing is a challenge in the best of times. And under your tenure as governor, you had a global pandemic come down the pike. I'd like to ask you to take a moment and reflect on that. Give yourself a grade. What did you do well? What could you have done differently? And with potential variants emerging, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's building the structure to deal with these. And I hear a lot of people say that, you didn't expect this or whatever. Well, leadership requires you to play the cards you're dealt, and to do it in a way that first and foremost the protection of the people of Minnesota, and then to triage what are you protecting? Life, then you're protecting hospital capacity, protecting economic growth. As a teacher, I know it's dangerous, and you should never give a grade before the assignment's done. This is not done, but I do think that what we've seen is that I'm incredibly proud, and I think this is one of the things that I came with and made a case to the people of Minnesota. I built successful teams, whether it was literally a team in football, or whether it's was building teams in the military, or being able to work collaboratively in Congress. And I think what we did is we put a team together here who was able to respond and adapt. We still rank amongst the 10th lowest states in death rates, although it's been challenging these last month. We're in the midst of the grip of the Delta variant. We've also protected hospital capacity, although that's being challenged. And I think one of the things is the idea that you separated economic stability from the pandemic. If you didn't deal with the pandemic, you destroy the economy. And I think of protecting that now and seeing both in terms of tax receipts, in terms of business survival rates, and seeing terms of outside groups measuring how Minnesotans did. For example, Children's Defense Fund said children in Minnesota fared better than any other state during the pandemic. I mean, housing security, food security, education. So I think it's too early to give that grade. I think the principles that we adhered to and keeping Minnesotans informed. And I think amongst all else, the one thing that that I knew was my responsibility, is to stand in front of Minnesotans and say, I take responsibility for this. If we're not going to get the testing done, who's responsible? Me. If we're not getting vaccines out fast enough, who's responsible? Me. And I think what that did is it created a sense of collaboration in and amongst state agencies to get this work done. So we got work to do yet. Minnesotans have been a big part of making this happen. I think the irony of, or the kind of cruelness of COVID, if you will, in this is, in the midst of this grip and seeing some of our death rates, in speaking with the president yesterday, his team was, noting and congratulating. Minnesota is second in all the states in terms of boosters, number of people have boosters, which is the real fix to this. And we're top 5 in terms of 5 to 11-year-olds. And I think that statistic speaks to Minnesotans of what they've done. So I think when a grade is given on this, there'll be a grade how Minnesotans did. I think state government, I think probably in my position as a politician, I'll get that grade next November, and that's and I respect that.
In the introduction, I mentioned the labor shortage. We've been talking about a silver tsunami for some time, and it seems like it's arrived. And the state is facing a workforce shortage in many sectors, including nursing homes and in healthcare. Now, you have addressed that for the short term by activating some of the National Guard to pick up the slack in hospitals and nursing care. But what is the possible solution for this labor shortage, both in those health sectors, but also across the broader economy?
No, it's a great question, the one everybody's asking. I just came from our economic expansion and inclusion, group of major leaders ranging from Fed Chair Kaskari down to Children's Defense Fund and entrepreneurs in asking this very question. You're absolutely right. Some of this is demographics. It's hard for me to believe it. I'm the last year of the baby boomers, if you will, 1964. A lot of folks who fell in my age or a little older decided that they weren't going back into the workforce. So there was that piece of it. I'm still proud Minnesota ranks first or second in labor participation rates. But I think what we have in a lot of cases is a misalignment of skills. I do want to say a thank you to the National Guard who have been asked to do so much. We're training about 400 of them to be CNAs. It takes about 75 hours of training because there's simply not enough workforce. As we have an aging population, we have a large number of long-term care facilities. We need to get those folks in there, but that can't be the long-term fix. I think one of the things, first and foremost, is we need to make sure the wages are competitive in those industries, both child care and long-term care. And I think we just need to name it. The people who care for our children and care for our parents are the ones we pay the least amount of money. We value those two things more than anything. We need to reflect that. We need an economy that works for the long-term care providers, but also for their workers. And I think that's a conversation that's happening. It's a conversation that's happening in the private sector. If you go to chambers of commerce or if you go to businesses, and we heard this in the UK and in Finland, the number one concern on all of those workers' minds is access to affordable child care. And then second behind that is, how do I take care of my parents? And so I think it's re-looking at those industries. They're broken, figuring out what the role of the state is and what the role of the private sector, if capitalistic economy can do it. The only thing I would say is a market failure in long-term care workers and a market failure in child care workers is catastrophic. It's not as if we're seeing, as you're right, bottlenecks in shipping chips so that trying to buy a car takes another month. That's a lot different than saying there's no one to go to work to care for your mother in the long-term care. So I think that's where the state is going to have to play a role. It's why I'm encouraging folks to take a look at the next piece of proposal, the Build Back Better program is a huge investment. And those who say that that child care is not infrastructure, nothing happens if there's not a place for children.
Governor Tim Walz, it has been such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to be with you.